This is Robert Mardlacci of the MindShare Learning Report, and welcome to this special MindShare TV InnovateHERs podcast series, episode number 8, with co-author Kathy Hurley in conversation with special guests Caroline Waugh and Jennifer Ferrari. And today we're going to garner insights on why purpose-driven entrepreneurial women rise to the top. And our first guest, Caroline Waugh, a little bit about her. She is an entrepreneur and artist. At 34 years old, Waugh quit her job as an executive for Progressive Grocer to start her own publishing company. After successfully growing the company, she sold it to R.R. Boker. While serving as an industry consultant, she started another publishing firm that was again sold to SIA. And today she is a commissioned artist who lectures, teaches, and writes books. She has degrees from a BS from New York University and an MBA from Pace University. Thank you for joining us today, Carol. And perhaps, Caroline, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what you're up to today and what you hope to share with us.
Thank you for inviting me. I was looking forward to this. What I'm up to today is I'm working as a full-time artist, and I've been doing that for 15 years. And so every day I get up and I make art, and it's great. I love it. But I'm always trying to figure out, how did I even get here from where I was in publishing? But it's always a challenge.
Well, amazing. And it's really about following your passion, isn't it?
Yes, I think
Kathy?
so.
Yeah, Carol could really give, I've known Carol for a long time, and she could really talk about each one of those entrepreneurial skills in depth. I mean, certainly passion. I remember I was looking at actually the book this morning again, and I saw that the chapter that she talks about is structuring an entrepreneurial pivot. And I thought, well, that's so perfect, because to go from corporate America into becoming a really world-renowned fabric artist is quite a feat. And I know as she's answering some of her questions, she'll talk about what she's doing with online courses around the world, with her newsletter, with their artwork. So we're really happy to have her. She's really a pretty busy lady, as is our next speaker, Jen. But we'll be asking them some questions. So thank you, Carol, for being
Well, with that, thank you so much, Caroline. And our next guest, Jennifer Ferrari, is the president and CEO of the Education Research and Development Institute, an organization that convenes educational thought leaders to collaboratively shape, influence, and inform the development of PK to 12 education products and services. Prior to joining the RDI, Jennifer spent 25 years in the field of public education as a middle school teacher, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, and chief schools officer in Chicagoland. Her areas of expertise include leadership development, change management, strategic planning, curriculum instruction, personalized learning, and dual language education. She holds degrees in political science education from Lake Forest College, an MA in curriculum instruction from National Louis University, and a PhD in administration and supervision from Loyola University. Jen, thank you for joining us today as well.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to Jen also. It's always great. That's another person I think I've really known a long time, and reading her section over again, it's like leading through change. And she took her job during the pandemic. So it's like, you can't have much more change than that. So she's a very, very smart young woman. And I think having both of you on today is just a real experience, because we've had Robert's been so great, and we really appreciate you, Robert, so much, of interviewing these women, and they're all very, very different, but to put on two dynamic women at the same time is going to be
well, and so inspirational for me as a male, because I'm learning so much from you. Men have so much to learn from women in entrepreneurship, and I'm looking forward to learning more about these incredible pivots you made and thrived. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Kathy for the first question.
Okay, before we start, I did want to say that I think Bobby Kirshen might be on the line, but she's in Estonia. So she certainly likes to be on these, and she's been hosting a lot of these herself. We try to kind of take turns back and forth, but she's in Estonia talking about the book and doing workshops, and people are purchasing books over there. So I'm feeling like we're just a really worldwide publication. So that's pretty exciting. So I'm going to start with Carol. And the first question is that Robert and I put together here. As someone who's been a serial entrepreneur, what do you think is the biggest challenge entrepreneurs, women or men, face in moving their ideas from concept to reality?
Definitely, it's access to capital.
No paycheck?
Yeah, when I first started my first company, my biggest challenge was, how do I move from corporate where I had a salary into being an entrepreneur, developing a company, and living and being able to pay my rent. So that I think that was the biggest challenge. And what I ended up doing was convincing my boss to lay me off and pay me a year's severance, because he didn't like women anyway, and he jumped at the chance. And so that was how I managed the first change in my life. And then I think, if you are single and don't have another person to pay the living expenses, that would be another challenge. At the time I was single, so I really had to figure that out before I could actually do my vision, my passion at the time. And a lot of people, when they start their own company, they get their funding from friends and family. And now we have GoFundMe. In the days that I was doing that, GoFundMe didn't exist. So I think there are lots of different ways that you can figure out how to fund yourself and how to fund the business. Because in the days when I was doing this, the banks would not lend to women. Unbelievable. So,
Wow.
so I think that's the biggest challenge.
Well, thank you for that. I'll pose the next question to Jennifer. While you transition positions as a change maker and innovator within the education space for much of your career, how challenging was it for you to make the transition into the private sector?
At the time, I felt like it was a huge leap. But what I quickly discovered is that the skills that you nurture in any context are transferable. And at the end of the day, that's what we've been trying to do as educators, is to give kids a set of skills that they can then apply to new and unknown contexts. And at the end of the day, sectors, although different, have lots of commonalities. And so your core strengths and your core skills transfer pretty easily. I'd say the biggest challenge is really learning the new vernacular and speaking business. I had to relearn a vocabulary. And once I was able to kind of nail down the vernacular, I felt like I was able to switch. My leadership skills transferred, my ingenuity transferred. And so while it was challenging, I think the biggest hurdle that I faced was self-imposed in many ways. I was feeling a bit of an imposter and a little, over my skis at times, but that's where and I'll talk about that more later on, but that's where you rely on mentors to help you kind of navigate those new waters.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Over to you, Kathy.
Okay, another one for Carol that involves the discussion of money. As when you talk about transitioning from the business world to the world of art, you said, I didn't know how to make art, but I did know how to make money. So I would love for you to talk about how you have built your business around some of these other ways, not just making art, to make some money.
Well, I totally agree with Jennifer. It's, how do you take your skills that you really know and transfer them to a new industry? And so when I stopped consulting and decided, well, my background was fashion and quilt making and sewing and all that kind of stuff. And I decided I'd go back to my roots and decided to become an artist. So once you do that and you jump into a new field, you have to figure out how do people make money? How do artists live? And I very quickly figured out that I couldn't live by selling original art, because that nobody I knew made their living that way. Most artists that I know make their living by doing other work, and then they do their art on the weekend, because it's really hard and this industry is difficult. So once I figured out what I needed to do, I needed to have a product, because I knew how to sell products. That's what I did. And so I developed a product called Stupendous Stitching. And once I figured out what that was, then I wrote a book. I created an online course. I went on the circuit and taught and lectured. And through those different things, I was able to market myself and make a living. And so, just as Jennifer said, if your strengths, in my case, are marketing, then you can do anything. Once you have a product, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. So I I'm my own product. So
yeah, Carol has a tremendous marketing background. She's one of the best marketers in our industry, although she hasn't been in our industry for a long time of publishing. But and then tell us a little bit about your newsletter.
Well, as a marketing person, my background is direct mail. Can you believe that? Does it exist anymore? Maybe.
Somewhat.
Maybe it'll come back, because everything comes back, right? So I knew that as a marketer, I needed to have a way to communicate to the people that I teach and the people that take my online class, because in online, you don't even know who's watching you, right? I don't know who's going to watch this. But if there's a way to get their email address, then you can put together a newsletter and communicate with them all the time. And then that's another conduit for selling product. So. Well,
on that note, Carol, I was inspired by Kathy with my newsletter, the Mindshare Report, that's 16 years later, it's still going strong, because Kathy told another newsletter publisher that if you want to be someone, you need to start a newsletter.
That's so right. You have a newsletter.
So here are the little secrets come out that Robert used to work for me many years ago at the Learning Company.
Yes,
oh my goodness.
It's true. It's true. And the gentleman that you advised, about the newsletter, award-winning, his name escapes me now.
Oh, Nelson Heller.
Nelson Heller, the Heller Report.
Heller Report.
Yeah.
And,
Carol knew Nelson Heller. See?
And here we are today. We're still going strong.
Yeah.
So thank you for that inspiration. I love the focus that you realized. And I think that is one amazing golden nugget around productizing your work, creating a product, and then that spun into other things, and the courses and the newsletter. Carol, that's brilliant. That is incredible advice. And you're inspiring me about what we're doing. And one of the things we talked about was creating a course that is very relevant to our next question around ed tech as a career option, because there are many ed tech leaders that want to pivot into industry, as Jen did. And we've started creating a course around that.
Oh, great.
So with that, Jen, in public education, instructional days are built around structure. Many entrepreneurs find structure constraining because there's not a lot of room for flexibility and creativity, although they're working on that. In the book, you discuss leveraging structure in times of chaos and uncertainty as critical. Can you expand on that idea that helps you harness your creativity? Because we get so caught up in the day-to-day minutia that it's not easy. It's not an easy process, is it?
No, and I'm actually going to reflect back to all the way back when I was a teacher in middle school. I was the teacher that kind of fought the boundaries. So I would be given a canned something, and I was known to say, what's the end goal? Be very clear about what that end goal is, and then give me leverage to do what I need to do. So I was kind of the deconstructionist of even curricular materials. So then when I moved into the principal role, we actually eliminated pacing guides, and we basically said, if this is the end goal and these are the outcomes we want all kids to be able to experience, use your strengths and your gifts to get there. And so that kind of concept of having strong outcomes with a very clear vision and a very clear set of expectations and some boundaries, kind of like a walled garden or goalposts, became kind of the way that I've led throughout my career. And during the pandemic, when everything was so uncertain and everything was just so scary for a lot of people, my team wanted structure more than ever. But we were navigating remote working for the first time. We used to all crowd around a room and a table together and work at one table. And so to lose that kind of structure was really challenging. And so we went back to the basics, and we literally spent time together talking about, without exception, what is it that we want to accomplish by this time, this time, and this time? What are we most aggressively going after in terms of our outcomes? What's making us motivated? Where do we feel like we have some flex? And then we put those structures in place to allow people freedom and space within that kind of walled garden to do what they wanted to do. And that's where I felt like the trust and the relationships came in, because you had to constantly remind them that I believe in you, I trust you, you've got a great sense and a great gut. Do what you know how to do and just get it done. And we actually eliminated some of those daily check-ins. We put more time in between project management so that people were more reflecting as opposed to asking for guidance. And so the structures were important, but it was the trust within the structures that actually helped us pivot and navigate and design a whole lot of new kind of outputs and new ways of doing work in the ERDI.
That's brilliant. And when you give students and team members agency, right, within the boundaries, that's when people thrive, I think. And kudos to you for your leadership vision. I love the story. Kathy, over to you.
Well, and Jen, I just want to say that Jen is a little bit like I said earlier, like Carol, because she's thought of new ways to engage the superintendents and to engage the partners. And she's got these exec chat meetings that she brings everybody online. She has an expert panel that companies can go to. In fact, Robert is really doing something with the expert panel and gives a talk on trends in the industry. So it's really thinking of all those other ways that you can get people excited about your product. And both of you do a great job of that.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is always a good one for somebody like Carol. As a woman entrepreneur in the 1980s, how did you compete and set yourself apart from your male counterparts?
Well, you're going to be laughing about this one, but I never really thought about it. I always considered myself equal to men. So I never considered them to be my competitors. I always considered them to be my partners. As a matter of fact, my first company, the first two partners I had were men. And so other than not wanting to report to a man, maybe that was more of a concern to me, that I wanted to have men report to me, even in the 80s.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well,
so
yeah. When we talk a lot about that with mentoring, is because we were in the industry in the 70s and 80s, there were not a lot of women in the industry. So
no.
Very, very helpful in my career. I know your career, and they continue to be. And that's why this book has been so much fun, because we get as many men asking us questions or writing us. And when we give out books or we sell books, they're like, I want one for my wife, or I want one for my daughter. Would you sign one for my employees? I mean, it's been really interesting. So there's a lot happening, I think, in that area.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about mentoring because, excuse me, my first mentor was a client of mine. I was working in a mail order company, and one of my clients was Hertz. And the client that I had, we worked so well together that he hired me and taught me how to sell car leasing, actually. And I was the only woman in the whole industry. So I had no trouble getting appointments with companies because I was so weird. And they just said, "You're selling car leasing? You're a woman?" And it was like, it was great. It was a great advantage for me. So I think in those days, being so different can be a big advantage. And today we have a lot more women in leadership, which is fabulous for us because, you know, my network of women friends and colleagues is huge. And it's been the one thing that sustained me my whole career. So
That's great.
you're one of my mentors, Kathy. I think it's mentored probably thousands of people. Everybody in the education industry knows Kathy. And so thank you.
I think ditto here, and Jen put up her hand as well. And I think mentorship isn't necessarily, I'm going to mentor you, you're my mentee. It's a natural evolution in many ways, isn't it, really? And it's that recognition and respect that you gain, and it's mutual mentorship in many ways that I've found.
Yeah.
Thoughts on
Mentoring
that?
is such a big topic, is understanding really, you know, how to be a mentor and how to accept working with a mentor. You know, I'm just going to put a sideline into this, and you're all going to laugh at this when I tell you. But one of my favorite shows is The Voice. So last night we're staying with some friends, and my sister was with me, and she said, "Do you mind turning on The Voice? It's the final night, and we want to see who's going to win." So we were with a couple who'd never seen The Voice. And he said, "Why do you like The Voice?" And I said, "Because you see these people getting better every single week. These mentors, these coaches really work with them to become first class entertainers." So we ended up after the show having a couple hour conversation about mentoring and how important it really is, and for people to accept it when they're told, "You don't have enough stage presence, you just don't have enough," and to say, "Thank you. You know, I really need to do that." Anyway, that's my little sideline for the
Amazing.
day. No extra fee on that.
Well, Kathy, I got the tail end, and Blake retired.
He
It was
did.
one of my favorites.
He did. He did.
No, it is a unique show, and we often watched it. And
As we digress.
but no, not at all. It is about mentorship very much. So over to you, Jen. As a leader, you actively recruit most innovative, forward-thinking superintendents and administrators to become members of ERDI. As an entrepreneurial leader, what criteria are you looking for in other leaders? How do you weigh in having diversity of thought versus a need to gather like-minded individuals? This really speaks to the innovators mindset that you have embraced. And was this something that was an evolution, or is it nature or versus nurture?
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. I'm not sure I could answer it. What I can share is that we're always seeking people that are looking out in front and then backwards mapping, people who can kind of see the future. And that takes someone that's entrepreneurial in spirit. People that are not afraid of change, that actually like change, that are willing to make mistakes and kind of fail forward. And essentially the market shifters in education, change is so slow. And so we're constantly seeking people that can see the future, can take steps towards the future quickly, and make change happen. And then in turn, they become somewhat the market shifters because they are the bellwethers for change, and people around them then follow suit. In terms of, the importance of having like-minded versus diversity of thought, I'd say there's two roles that kind of dynamic play. When you're problem solving or you're looking to create a change plan, you want the most diversity possible so that you can poke holes in your plan, you can see different angles, you can become as close to fail-safe as you can in the way that you move forward. But in reality, and why we kind of focus around problems of practice and we lead with values and core vision, is because to actually change, you have to be at least in the same hemisphere in the ways that you're thinking. So at ERDI, we just by nature, the fact that we're a national institute, have diversity of thought. But what binds us together is our mutual values and commitments to ensuring a productive education where all kids have access to high quality learning. And so if with that binding us together, I always say, when you look at a circle and there's arrows of excellence in every direction, they're all excellent in their own right. But if you're excellent in this way and someone else is excellent in this way, you stay stuck in the mud and you never move. So the goal of leadership is to find things that bind us together, bring everybody up into the same hemisphere at least, so that you can move forward. And so it's a yes and. I don't see it as an either or. I see it as a yes and.
Brilliant. Anyone else want to weigh in on her thoughts and comments?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think this whole, that's why leadership is such a big topic right now, is that you really have to. I remember one time running for a board early on in my career, and I was running against somebody who was a really strong leader in our industry. His name was Dick Cassabone, wonderful guy. And I was like, wow, why do I have to go be running against someone that's so well known and so good in the industry? And the answer was, we have to have two really good people running so that whoever wins is going to lead this organization. And, I really sat back and I took that to heart. And I thought, well, you can't be running against someone who's weak. What if the weak person runs? And we've seen that. But anyway, I think that is kind of an interesting topic. So thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Jen. Over to you, Kathy.
Okay, Carol, you talked a little bit about mentoring, and I don't want to really put you on the spot, but I will. Can you think of one or two people who really were mentors where you really learned something that made you more successful? And then also, what skills did you learn? I know you've written a lot of books, and you've written books about things that you didn't really know a lot about, and you learned them so you could write the book. So what about skills and mentoring? What kinds of things have you learned?
Well, I guess the most important mentor I had was Mike. I worked for him for, 6 or 7 years. And when he hired me, he said, the person who had the job that you are going to take left me because I wouldn't let her grow. And he said, I'm not going to make the same mistake with you. And I thought, wow, that was really something to hear. And it was true. When I took the job and I had ideas about how to market things and what to do, he let me do it. And he never told me, no, you have to do it my way. So I had so much independence that's how I grew. And every time I made a mistake, which I did, I was young, he would say, okay, you made a mistake, but don't worry about it. That's how you grow. And so he mentored me for all those years, to the point where he told me that I needed to go get an MBA and that he would figure out how the company would pay for it, which they did. And I did my MBA there. And so he was so encouraging. He was so supportive. So it wasn't like he said, this is how you do marketing. This is, what you do. And I think when you learn on your own, it becomes part of you. So when I became an artist, I took that with me and I set up a mentoring course. So when I had an art gallery, I knew that there were all these artists out there that had no clue about marketing. And, their whole idea is, you make art, you put it in a gallery, the gallery sells it, you make money. Well, that doesn't work anymore. And so they really had to learn marketing skills on their own in order to be successful. And so I mentored, actually, 25 artists during the time that I had a gallery. And I knew what it was like to sell and to be successful, because I was. So I was happy to tell these people, this isn't how you hang your work. This is how you frame your work. This is how you connect with art consultants. This is how you manage your fan base, you know, and this is how you need to have a website to sell your work. I mean, so it was really fulfilling for me. And that's probably what I miss the most about not having an art gallery anymore. But
well, I think those are really important tips. You know, people think even with social media, they'll, you know, put up their website or they'll do a newsletter and then, but if you don't tell people about it, they're never going to know about it. And it does go more than ever. Marketing is critically important to get the word out about what you're doing. And I know, again, Jen has been doing a great job with EODI. I see a lot of people in the industry and they're always talking about, you know, being at one of her meetings or talking to people who have been part of her meetings. So I think that's really good wisdom there. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, Carol. And the word that comes to mind is storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, storytelling is so in vogue today. And, you know, from elementary school kids having the opportunity to share their work and their stories to entrepreneurs today, or artists for that matter, it really illuminates, you know, brings it to life, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the human interaction that teachers, the value teachers add as well, that will never go away. And when it can't be a static product and people are going to jump on it. You really have to illuminate it. So with that, I'm going to go back to, did you want to comment on that at all, Jen, before we go into the final question for you?
Well, no, just that I think the next question is focusing on mentorship. And, you know, I'm listening to all of you, and this, I think at the core, there's a difference between coaching and mentorship. Coaching is more calculated. And I think that, you know, it's skill based, but then mentorship really focuses on deep relationships, and deep relationships are fostered by storytelling and deep listening on both sides of the equation. And so as I think about this, listening is a theme that we've talked a lot about in the book and just throughout our trajectories. And I think that change happens when you listen deeply. You know, people will say to me, "How did you know that?" And I would just say, "I listened." If you listen to the people, the answers come, and then you follow kind of the direction that the group tells you to go through story, through input, through ideating, and so forth. So I think listening is a real core part of this, and that storytelling is really important.
Absolutely. And, you know, it speaks to the whole notion of mentorship and the purpose of the book. You know, it was a catalyst, wasn't it, really, between Kathy, you and Bobby, and the immense experience and the relationships that you have. We talk about relationships, and that's so critical in education and in business. It's one of the transfer skills, no doubt, Jen, that you harnessed, and Carol as well, in thriving and helping people. And at the end of the day, it's how can I help you? That makes a huge impact, whether it's, you know, an educator or an entrepreneur. I think people are realizing that you can't, you know, shove something down their throat unless it's something that is really needed. So understanding what, and coming back to your listening skills, it's so vitally important to pay attention. And that's what I try to do most days when I'm having conversations with my wife, and she tells me I have issues with listening, but my doctor tells me, no, that's just selective hearing. So
what Charles used to say, it's selective hearing.
So,
you know,
well, we'll bring it back over to you, Kathy.
I think you can learn from each other. And I think some of the things you're saying, I'm thinking about, you know, writing this book with somebody like is so great in research, like, you know, Bobby Kirshan, and Laura was Smolian was helping us, and she's just young and creative and smart. And, you know, you just, when the whole thing was finished, it was such a group, you know, project that it's really exciting as you see now that the book is really, you know, taking off and people are really interested. You think, well, this is not a one person show here. You know, we've really learned from each other. So I agree with everything you're saying. With
that, this brings us to the conclusion of the questions. Final thoughts to share, ladies. Over to you.
Yes,
Carol.
I wanted to be able to share about the mentorship as well. It's about it's about being vulnerable and protecting time. So I'm going to use Kathy as an example. We had the good fortune last week of spending a good chunk of time together with some amazing women. And that was an investment in time in all of our parts. But this is what cultivates and ultimately propels these deep relationships that become mentor-like. And there's, times throughout the year where I will call Kathy and she always picks up the phone, and I'll say, I am really stewing about something and I just need to talk through it with you and think through it. And Kathy always will say something like, and that's it. And she just keeps listening and keeps probing. And that's interesting. And then by the end, she's essentially asked enough questions for me to come to my own kind of outcome. But on the flip side, if I'm ever off base, Kathy's the first person to say, no, I think you're dead wrong on that. And you really need to think differently about this, or I'm going to challenge you to think differently on this. And so it takes a trust, there takes a vulnerability, but it's also about protecting time and investing. That's, I think, the biggest commodity of mentorship is time and energy and vulnerability.
Well said, Jennifer. Thank you so much for that. Over to you, Carol.
Oh, I totally agree. I think my network started in Fire Island when a group of us, Kathy, women in educational publishing at the time, we all rented a house. And every weekend we went out there and we told stories about our lives and about what was happening. And we cried, we smiled, we swam together, we just did everything together. And that was really the beginning. You're right, Jennifer. It's all about relationships. It's all about how do you develop really deep understanding of another person. And really the only way to do that is spend time with them. And so I was really lucky that happened with me. And I'll never forget our Fire Island, and I want to go back. We're at the same house.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these relationships go on for many, many years, and you don't realize, just another short story. I know we're really getting along, but I had someone came up to me at a meeting I was recently at, the Council of Great City Schools, and I didn't really remember that it was someone I worked with 20 years ago, at Pearson. And she said, you gave me an award once for a team player award. And she said, and you wrote me the nicest note, and I've kept that for 20 years. And it just was like really so touching, like really, you just don't know how you're affecting someone's life. So I think the moral of the story is these acts of kindness and mentoring and, giving back, I think is really important. And if you've, been successful and you've had good mentors, I think that it's just important to continue doing that. And that is very fulfilling. This has been a great conversation. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry Bobby's in Estonia. I'd like to be there myself. It's a beautiful place. And she has such a great international reputation. So, I think these kinds of discussions are really great. So thank you to both of you. And of course, Robert, thank you to you.
Well, thank you. This has been an absolute gift this morning. And thank you, Carolyn and Jennifer and Kathy, for this inspiring conversation. Episode number 8 of MindShareTV InnovateHERs podcast series. My name is Robert Martelacci of the MindShare Learning Report. And be sure to stay tuned for InnovateHERs podcast series number 9 coming your way soon. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.
Thank you.